In the deep, silent cold of the North Atlantic, the world shrinks. For the 50 men of a German U-boat, it becomes this steel tube, 200 feet of welded metal, a predator's instinct, and the unwavering belief in the superiority of their craft and their cause. Their captain, a man we shall call Klaus Richter, is a product of this belief. A veteran of the campaign, he knows the sea's dark rhythms, the mathematics of a torpedo solution, and the chilling satisfaction of a successful hunt. His world is one of angles, speed, and tonnage. He measures victory in the sunken hulls of Allied merchantmen, each one a neat calculation entered into his logbook, a small step towards severing the enemy's lifeline. On this particular evening, the air in the control room is thick with the familiar fug of diesel, recycled air, and brewing coffee. The boat runs silent. At periscope depth, a ghost beneath the waves. Richter, his eyes pressed to the rubber eyepiece, scans a black horizon broken only by the silver path of the moon. He is a patient man. The sea has taught him patience above all else. His first watch officer, a young, eager man named Franz, stands beside him, his gaze fixed on the captain's impassive face. They have been on patrol for 40 days, and their successes have made them bold. They are part of a wolf pack, a brotherhood of hunters who believe they are the masters of this ocean. Anything, Herr Kapitän? Franz asks, his voice a low murmur. Patience, Franz, Richter replies, not taking his eyes from the lens. They are out there, fat, slow, and stupid, like cattle waiting for the slaughter. He says it with the quiet confidence of a man who believes he is at the technological and philosophical apex of naval warfare. They are the wolves, the Allies are the sheep. It is the natural order. The Kriegsmarine, Germany's navy, had entered the Second World War with a philosophy carved from the crucible of the First. It was a doctrine shaped by Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, a man who dreamed of a decisive surface battle, a new Jutland. He envisioned leviathans of steel like the Bismarck and the Tirpitz ships, designed to be titans, to slug it out with Britain's Royal Navy in a Wagnerian duel for supremacy. And where the battle fleet could not reach, the U-boat, the lone wolf championed by his rival, Karl Dönitz, would sever the enemy's arteries of supply. It was a navy of hunters, of raiders. It understood the gun, and it understood the torpedo, but it did not, in its soul, understand the airplane at sea. This was not for a complete lack of trying. Germany did lay down an aircraft carrier, the Graf Zeppelin, launched with great fanfare in 1938, with Hitler himself in attendance. It was an ambitious project, a nod to the changing face of naval power observed in Britain, Japan, and America, but it was a vessel born of a conflicted doctrine and bureaucratic infighting. The Luftwaffe, under Hermann Göring, jealously guarded its control over all things that flew, refusing to cede authority for a dedicated naval air arm. Consequently, German designers, lacking experience and a clear strategic purpose, hedged their bets. They equipped the carrier with cruiser-style guns for surface combat, a feature absent from focused American or Japanese designs, which relied on escort ships for protection. The Graf Zeppelin was a hybrid, a beast of two minds, belonging fully to neither the sea nor the sky. As the war demanded more immediate priorities, more U-boats to starve Britain, more tanks for the vast plains of Russia, its construction languished. It would never become operational, destined to rust in a Baltic port, a 23,000-ton monument to a strategic vision that had stalled. The German naval mind remained tethered to the sea's surface, and to the dark world just beneath it. They believed they knew their enemy. They believed they understood the scale of the war. They were, in this assessment, catastrophically wrong. Across the ocean, another reality was being forged in fire and steel. After the shock of Pearl Harbor, a consensus had been reached in the halls of American power. The age of the battleship was over. The future of naval warfare would be decided not by the caliber of a ship's guns, but by the number of aircraft it could project across the horizon. America, the sleeping giant, was not just waking up, it was retooling its entire industrial soul to a single purpose. The result was the Essex-class aircraft carrier. It was not a ship, in the traditional sense. It was a sovereign territory of American power, nearly 900 feet long, displacing over 36,000 tons, with a crew of more than 2,600 men. It was a floating airbase, a factory, a barracks, a hospital, a city, and they were being built with an inhuman speed that defied all European logic of shipbuilding. While Japan, a mature naval power, would manage to build 6 new fleet carriers during the entire war, the United States would build 17 of the Essex class alone, part of a larger program that produced over 100 carriers of all types. A Ford factory at Willow Run was producing a B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. In the shipyards of Newport News, Virginia, and Quincy, Massachusetts, they were building these floating cities with the same assembly line ethos. It was a productive capacity that no intelligence report could adequately convey, a reality so far beyond the German experience that it might as well have been science fiction. The first hint of this new reality for men like Captain Richter came not as a report, but as a new sound in the skies over the mid-Atlantic gap, that once safe haven for U-boats, far from the reach of land-based Allied aircraft. It was the steady, ominous drone of an engine where no engine should be. For Richter and his crew, the world had turned upside down in a matter of seconds. The hunter had become the hunted. The attack came with shocking speed, not from a destroyer they could see, not from a corvette they could outmaneuver, but from the sky. An American Grumman Avenger, launched from the deck of an unseen escort carrier hundreds of miles from the nearest land, appears as a speck and becomes a screaming harbinger of death. Alarm! Flugzeug! Tauchen! The orders are roared, and the U-boat angles down, the sea rushing to embrace and protect it. But it is too late. The depth charges are already in the water. The first explosions are concussive blows, felt more than heard, lifting the stern of the boat and slamming it down. Lights flicker and die. A shower of cork insulation rains down. Men are thrown against machinery. The steel hull, their world, their armor, groans under the immense pressure, the sound of a dying whale. They are blind, fighting a ghost. Another explosion, closer this time, ruptures a high-pressure airline with a deafening shriek. The lights go out for good, replaced by the acrid smell of ozone from fried electrical circuits and the panicked shouts of the wounded in the sudden, terrifying darkness. The order is given the most dreaded in a submariner's lexicon: Auftauchen, alle Mann ausbooten. Surface, abandon ship. For Klaus Richter, floating in the oil-slicked water, the cold sea sucking the warmth from his body, watching his boat slip beneath the waves, it is the end of his war. He has lost his command, his men, his purpose. He is now a survivor, a castaway, awaiting capture. What he does not yet know is that his education is about to begin. The enemy he thought he knew is about to reveal its true face, and it will be a face of such scale and power that it will shatter every conviction he has ever held. A destroyer appears on the horizon to pluck them from the water. The American sailors are professional, disturbingly efficient. They offer no taunts, only blankets and hot, sweet coffee. Richter and his surviving crewmen are now prisoners of war. Stripped of their uniforms, their identities, they are taken to the heart of the task force that destroyed them, and there, rising from the grey swells of the Atlantic, he sees it for the first time. It is not its size alone that stuns him, though it is bigger than any vessel he has ever seen. It is the sheer, brutal impossibility of it. He sees aircraft, dozens of them, parked on a vast, flat plane of a deck that stretches out like a runway. He watches as an elevator, a huge section of the deck itself, rises from the depths of the ship, carrying another plane as if by magic from a subterranean world. He sees hundreds of men, tiny figures in the distance, moving with a disciplined, unhurried rhythm. This is not a warship in the way he understands the term. It is a piece of a city, torn from the mainland and set afloat upon the sea. As he is brought aboard, the scale becomes even more disorienting. The climb up the accommodation ladder seems to go on forever. When he steps onto the flight deck, the noise is a physical assault. The deafening roar of engines, the violent hiss of steam from the catapults, the shouts of men, the metallic clang of machinery. It is the sound of industry, a sound he associated with the Krupp works in Essen, not the middle of the ocean. He and the other captured officers are led below, and here, the true revelation begins. They descend into a labyrinth. Corridors stretch into the distance, painted a sterile grey, lined with a dense web of pipes and conduits. They pass machine shops where men in overalls are welding, grinding, and repairing aircraft components with an air of focused calm. They see a laundry with massive steam presses and rows of churning washing machines. They glimpse a post office where clerks are sorting mail for a population of thousands. It is a self-contained, self-sufficient universe. Their escort, a young Navy lieutenant with an easy smile, perhaps senses their disbelief. He points down a passageway. Chow lines that way. Mess hall serves about 8,000 meals a day. We've got our own bakery, butcher shop, even a soda fountain. We call it a Gedunk bar. Richter says nothing. In Germany, the entire nation is on strict rations. Bread is coarse and supplemented with sawdust. Meat is a memory. Coffee is a bitter concoction made from acorns. Here, in the middle of the Atlantic, thousands of enemy sailors are being served fresh baked bread and ice cream. They are led to a small cabin that will serve as their temporary cell. It is sparse, but clean. Through the open doorway, Richter can see into a larger compartment, where off-duty sailors are lounging in their bunks. One is reading a brightly colored comic book, a hero in a blue suit, and a red cape leaping from the page. Another is carefully cleaning his rifle, while listening to a portable radio playing a jaunty swing tune. They are boys, most of them, barely out of their teens, with open, confident faces. They look well-fed, healthy, and astonishingly unconcerned. They are fighting a world war, yet they carry with them the casual atmosphere of a peacetime barracks. This casualness is, in its own way, more intimidating than any display of anger or hatred would have been. It speaks of a power so vast, it doesn't need to be angry. Later, an American intelligence officer comes to interrogate him. He is young, clean-shaven, and speaks flawless, unaccented German. He offers Richter a cigarette. It is an American brand, a Lucky Strike. The taste is smooth, rich, a world away from the harsh ersatz tobacco available back home. The simple act, the small luxury, is a weapon in itself, a casual demonstration of an abundance Richter's country has long since forgotten. The officer's questions are direct, but his manner is relaxed. He wants to know about U-boat tactics, morale, fuel reserves. Richter gives him little, citing the Geneva Convention. The American nods, unfazed. He doesn't press. He seems to know that the ship itself is the only interrogation necessary. After the perfunctory questioning, Richter is escorted to the sickbay for a medical checkup. He expects a small, cramped room with a few cots, like the one on the depot ship in Lorient. What he finds is a fully equipped hospital. There are operating theaters with brilliant overhead lights, a dental clinic, an X-ray laboratory, and beds for dozens of patients. The doctor who examines him is a calm, professional man who notes the German's minor injuries and treats them with practiced ease. In his hometown of Hamburg, Allied bombing has reduced the hospitals to rubble, forcing doctors to operate by candlelight. Here, the enemy has a better medical facility floating on the ocean than many German cities possess on land. The realization is sickening, but the true epiphany, the moment that will forever define his understanding of the war, comes a day later. He is being moved, and his path takes him along a catwalk overlooking the hangar deck. He stops, frozen by the sight below. It was here, in the belly of the beast, that Klaus Richter finally understood. He was not just fighting a nation, he was fighting an industrial system, a force of nature that operated on a scale he could barely comprehend. The hangar deck was 3 stories high, a brilliantly lit cavern that stretched for hundreds of feet. It held nearly 100 aircraft, Hellcats, Avengers, Helldivers, packed wingtip to wingtip. Maintenance crews swarmed over them with a controlled urgency. He watched, mesmerized, as teams of mechanics, working under bright fluorescent lights, serviced the planes with a speed and efficiency that was terrifying. A damaged Hellcat, its wing shredded by anti-aircraft fire, was lowered on the giant elevator, Within minutes, a crew was swarming it, cutting away the ruined section. He had no doubt that a new wing would be fitted and the plane would be flying again within hours, perhaps even by the next day. In the Luftwaffe, an aircraft was a precious, almost sacred object. A pilot was a modern knight, his machine a thoroughbred. They were instruments of lethal artistry. Here, on this American ship, aircraft were treated as expendable commodities. They were ammunition. If one was shot down, another would be wheeled out to take its place. If one was damaged beyond easy repair, it might simply be pushed overboard to make room for a new one arriving from a supply ship. He saw the ordnance men, the red shirts, moving trolleys loaded with bombs and torpedoes. He saw the green shirts of the maintenance crews, their hands stained with grease. He saw the yellow shirts directing the movement of planes on the deck. It was a perfectly choreographed dance of logistics and destruction. This single ship possessed more air power than some entire nations, and America had dozens of them. Dozens more were being built. The young lieutenant from the escort destroyer found him there, on the catwalk. He followed Richter's gaze down to the hangar deck. "Impressive, isn't it?" the American said, his voice matter of fact. "They call this place the Forge. This is where we mend the tools." Richter turned to the young man. All the arrogance, all the ingrained belief in German superiority had drained away, leaving a hollow space filled with a cold, terrifying clarity. "You don't have tools," Richter said, his German accent thick with a new, profound weariness. "You have a factory, an assembly line. We are craftsmen. We make a single, perfect sword. You manufacture an endless supply of hammers, and you are crushing us with them." The American considered this for a moment, then gave a slight shrug. "War's a dirty business, Captain. You use what works." That night, unable to sleep, Richter thought of his homeland. He thought of the posters proclaiming the genius of German engineering. He thought of the newsreels showing the Führer promising new wonder weapons that would turn the tide. He now knew it was all a lie, a grand, tragic delusion. Germany's leaders had promised their people a swift, heroic war, a clash of wills where spirit and ideology would triumph. They had prepared for a sprint, but the Americans had prepared for a marathon. They weren't fighting with ideology, they were fighting with spreadsheets, with production quotas, with logistics. He remembered the talk in the officers' mess in Lorient. They had laughed at the Americans. They called them a mongrel nation, decadent, soft, corrupted by jazz music and Hollywood movies, a nation of shopkeepers, incapable of the discipline and sacrifice required for total war. How could they have been so wrong? They had judged America by its culture, but they had failed to comprehend its system, a system that could churn out wealth and comfort in peacetime, and then, with the flip of a switch, churn out staggering, overwhelming quantities of war material. In the days that followed, as the carrier steamed westward towards the United States, the cultural shocks continued to accumulate. He saw sailors in their off hours gathered around a speaker, listening to a baseball game broadcast from thousands of miles away. He saw them watching a movie projected onto a bulkhead, a comedy with Danny Kaye. Laughter echoed in the passageways of a ship of war. He saw men lining up for pay, then using their cash to buy Coca-Cola and candy bars at the ship's store. Abundance, leisure, normalcy. It was the normalcy that was most unnerving. It was as if America was able to fight the most brutal war in human history without ever breaking a sweat, without its people ever truly feeling the privation that had gripped every corner of German life. This, Richter realized, was the true source of their power. The war was a project, not a crusade. It was a problem to be solved with overwhelming resources. The young men on this ship were not fanatics indoctrinated from childhood. They were citizens. They were mechanics and farm boys and students who had been given a job to do, and they were doing it with a kind of detached, confident competence that was far more formidable than any fanaticism. When the carrier finally arrived at Norfolk, Virginia, Richter stood on the deck, a prisoner under guard, and looked out at the United States. He saw the endless line of ships in the harbor. He saw the city, blazing with lights, a sight unseen in Europe for years due to blackout regulations. He saw the cars moving on the streets, the cranes working in the shipyards. He saw a nation not just untouched by the war, but seemingly energized by it. He was transferred to a prisoner of war camp in the American Midwest, where the revelations continued on a continental scale. The food was plentiful. The guards were, for the most part, humane. He and his fellow prisoners were put to work, sometimes on local farms, where they witnessed an agricultural mechanization that made German methods seem medieval. He saw a single farmer cultivate a field of corn that stretched to the horizon using a massive combine harvester. The farmer's wife would sometimes bring them lemonade and apple pie, a simple act of kindness that was also, in its own way, a demonstration of unimaginable abundance. He saw a country so vast, so rich in resources, so insulated from the horrors they had unleashed upon the world, that victory for Germany was not just improbable, it had been impossible from the start. In the long, quiet years of his captivity, Klaus Richter would often reflect on his time aboard that American carrier. It was a crucible that had burned away his illusions. He had started the war as a proud servant of the Third Reich, a believer in its strength and destiny. He ended it with the quiet, bitter understanding that he had been a cog in a machine that had challenged not a rival nation, but an entire industrial planet. He remembered the Lucky Strike cigarette, the fresh bread, the sound of laughter during a movie night. He remembered the boy reading the Superman comic, a flimsy paper fantasy that was somehow connected to the steel reality of the hangar deck. He remembered that vast, roaring forge of American power. These were the details that explained Germany's defeat more profoundly than any analysis of battlefield tactics. The war, for Germany, had been a grand opera, full of Sturm und Drang, a battle for the soul of the world. For the United States, it had been an engineering problem. After the war, when the captured German officers returned home to a country in ruins, they brought with them a story that many were not ready to hear. It was not a story of tactical mistakes or a stab in the back. It was a story of an enemy that they had fatally, fundamentally misunderstood. An enemy that could build cities on the water and send them to war. They had gone to sea to hunt ships, only to discover that they were facing a floating world, a symbol of a new kind of power that had rendered their courage, their training, and their convictions tragically irrelevant. They had set out to master the ocean, and had instead been swallowed by the tide of a new century.